Most six-figure professionals assume that if their role survives, their career path survives with it. That assumption is getting more dangerous. In many U.S. enterprises, firms are keeping the seat, keeping the workload, and keeping the function visible while quietly removing the economics that once made the path worth staying on. The role remains, the meetings remain, the manager still says the work matters. What disappears is the future attached to it. That is the mechanism. The enterprise does not always need to eliminate a function in order to reprice it. It can preserve output continuity while stripping away promotion velocity, sponsorship depth, and compensation slope. For the worker, this is easy to miss because the calendar is still full and the role still looks respectable from the outside. But inside the allocation model, the position has often moved from a compounding asset to a maintenance expense. For the target employee, the financial trap is real long before the org chart changes. Mortgage payments, school costs, health insurance dependence, and a lifestyle built around expected upward mobility create a powerful illusion of safety. You tell yourself the path is still intact because the company has not removed the role. But if the enterprise has already decided that your layer is no longer where margin expansion or strategic control will come from, staying busy does not protect your economics. AI and workflow software make this more likely, not less. When a function becomes easier to template, easier to monitor, easier to support with internal tools, and easier to surround with automation, leadership no longer has to remove it to reduce its value. They can keep the labor and downgrade the pathway. That is why career hollowing often shows up before formal automation displacement. The technology does not have to fully replace the role. It only has to weaken the case for paying the role like a future leadership track. From management's point of view, this is rational capital behavior. Direct elimination creates noise, severance cost, internal anxiety, and political resistance. Quiet pathway hollowing is cleaner. Compensation bands stop stretching upward. Promotion gates tighten. Layer flattening becomes margin-driven policy. Scope expands without proportional title movement. The firm keeps throughput, preserves continuity, and gradually teaches the organization that this seat is still necessary but no longer premium. This is where many professionals misread stability. They see that the function still exists and conclude the career is healthy. But role persistence and career value are different variables. A seat can survive because the business still needs coverage, reporting hygiene, customer handling, coordination, or system continuity. That does not mean the enterprise still wants to build decision makers from that seat. The shell survives. The upside does not. The warning signs are usually cumulative rather than dramatic. Promotion velocity compresses, raises lag inflation and lateral market movement. Strategic projects begin routing around your layer even while day-to-day work keeps increasing. Senior people rely on your reliability, but do not seek your judgment when the downside is meaningful. Training continues, but it looks more like continuity insurance than developmental investment. Those signals matter because they reveal how the firm now classifies the role internally. The classification shift is subtle but expensive. Once a function is treated as operational infrastructure rather than an engine of future leverage, the enterprise stops using it as a proving ground for authority. The strongest sponsorship, ambiguity, and hard budget exposure migrate elsewhere. Usually, they move toward roles closer to revenue control, risk containment, executive trust, or cross-functional adjudication. The people left behind can still perform well for years and still experience a steady decline in bargaining power. That is why working harder inside the same lane often fails to solve the problem. Better execution can preserve employability. It does not automatically restore trajectory. If the company has already concluded that the role is strategically capped, becoming a more polished version of the same asset mostly makes you easier to keep, not harder to outgrow. Appreciation may increase. Pricing power may not. In a hollowed pathway, strong performance often earns volume before it earns leverage. One useful question is whether strong performance in your seat still buys access to harder consequences. Do high performers in your function get larger budgets, more trusted judgment calls, and clearer sponsorship into roles that actually influence capital, risk, or executive decisions? Or do they mainly receive more coordination, more coverage responsibility, and a reputation for keeping the machine stable? The first pattern compounds over time because authority accumulates where consequence sits and where downside is real. The second extends your stay inside a flatter economic ceiling. Another reason this mechanism is hard to detect is that firms often keep the symbols of progression in place after the economics have weakened. There may still be career frameworks, level language, competency grids, and annual narratives about development. But the real test is outcome flow. Are people actually moving upward with meaningful compensation separation, or is the pathway mostly preserving morale while the enterprise concentrates real mobility elsewhere? When the symbols remain but the outcomes thin out, the repricing has already begun beneath the language of growth and professional development. This is especially dangerous for coordination-heavy and middle-layer roles because the work can remain highly visible even as the pathway hollows. Visibility is not the same as strategic scarcity. Many firms are perfectly willing to praise a role they have no intention of materially re-rating upward. A role can be central to recurring execution and still sit outside the company's map of protected future value. In fact, some of the busiest people in an enterprise are sitting inside lanes the firm once maintained operationally, but no longer wants to fund like a source of long-duration advancement or authority formation over time. The practical mistake is waiting for explicit bad news. By the time a company openly signals that your layer is no longer a priority, several years of economic damage may already be done through weaker raises, slower promotion timing, reduced access, and compounding opportunity cost. The role did not disappear, so you stayed. The team still needed you, so you assumed the path was intact. Meanwhile, the enterprise had already changed the bargain underneath you and reset the ceiling without announcing it directly to the people affected. So the sharper career question is not whether your job still matters. It is whether the organization still expects serious economic ascent from the job you are in. If the firm wants continuity from the role, but no longer wants to build future power through it, then the risk is not immediate unemployment. The risk is spending prime earning years inside a position the company has chosen to preserve operationally while downgrading financially. For many six-figure professionals, that is the more expensive loss, because the damage arrives gradually while the role still appears secure and respectable to the outside world today.